Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida recently announced that critical race theory has no place in Florida schools, which is a wonderful thing because critical race theory is complete nonsense, and I think it's actually very racist. So let's jump in and find out why DeSantis says this, and then I'll give you plenty of examples to show why critical race theory is very dangerous. So DeSantis said that Florida's civics curriculum will incorporate foundational concept with the best materials, and it will expressly exclude unsanctioned narratives like critical race theory. And then he said, let me be clear, there is no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. And I 100% agree with him. Critical race theory should not be taught in schools. As a matter of fact, I'll go one step further. It shouldn't be taught in corporations or in the federal government or at all. Critical race theory is a bunch of nonsense that makes no sense and is inherently racist. Which is why, when Trump stopped critical race theory teachings in the federal government, I was a big fan of that move. But a lot of people weren't, and now Biden has reversed the policy, and once again they're teaching racist policies and practices in the federal government. Big surprise. Now, why do I keep saying that critical race theory is itself racist and dangerous? Perhaps you think that critical race theory is just trying to fix the racial issues in America. Well, you are misguided or misinformed, because critical race theory leads to nonsense like this. In Oregon, for example, the Department of Education put out this very long pamphlet on how to fix racial inequality or racism in mathematics. And they said, for example, that white supremacy culture shows up in math classrooms when students are required to show their work. It also said that white supremacy shows up when the focus is only on getting the right answer. And it has right in quotations as if there is more than one right answer. And sometimes in math, there is more than one right answer. But other times, if you're looking at 2 plus 2, the answer is 4. I wouldn't really accept 3 or 5 or 100 because that's not the quote right answer. And being right is pretty important when it comes to math, especially when you start talking about people like engineers. Getting the right answer is pretty important when they're building a house or a bridge. Now, the inherent racism here is the implication that black students can't get the right answer or can't show their work in the same way that white students can. And that is obviously racist because that's not true. But the implication here is that we need to stop doing these things because it's hindering black students from doing well in math classrooms, which is complete nonsense and is racist. For another example, let's look at this curriculum that high schoolers who are 9th and 10th graders were taught, that we need to, quote, confront whiteness in our classrooms, which is very similar to what we see from the Coca-Cola training, thanks to Robin DiAngelo, saying that we need to try to be less white. And what that means, in Robin DiAngelo's mind at least, is that we need to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less certain, less defensive, less ignorant. We need to be more humble. We need to listen, believe, break with apathy, and break with white solidarity. Now, obviously, telling someone to be less of a certain color or race, well, that seems pretty racist to me. Because if you were to take this, literally, to try and be less white and pretend you're a different race, well, then you become a Rachel Dolezal and you end up in trouble going that way too. But putting that aside, it's also ironic to me that you have these people saying be less white, and they're the same people who are advocating or saying that we need to be or allow black people to be unapologetically black. That's pretty much the favorite phrase of activists, to be unapologetically black. And I have no problem with that phrase. I think it's completely fine, and I agree with it. You shouldn't have to apologize for being black, but you also shouldn't have to apologize for being white. And you shouldn't have to try to be less white, whatever that means, because that's racist. Now we'll get to the worst example in just a second, but before we do, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll always get information like this with facts and sources straight into your YouTube feed. But perhaps the worst example of critical race theory and its implications just happened a few days ago. The Daily Wire reports that a group of current and former teachers and others in Loudoun County, Virginia, compiled a lengthy list of parents suspected of disagreeing with school systems actions, including critical race theory, and that this group was going to infiltrate and use hackers to try and expose these people publicly. It's a private group on Facebook called the Anti-Racist Parents of Loudoun County, and it includes people who are teachers, former teachers, parents, public officials, all sorts of people who shouldn't be blacklisting other individuals, especially private individuals. Now here we have a fairly concise example of what the group is trying to do. that their goal is to gather information, including mailing lists and names of folks who are against critical race theory. That they need to create fake profiles to infiltrate into these groups and use hackers to either shut down their websites completely or redirect them to pro-critical race theory teachings. And they need to spread information which includes exposing these people publicly to, blacklist them. And then at the end of the day, they want to make money for all of their wonderful efforts in helping humanity. One member of this group, who is a former teacher but currently an education contributor, I think is what they call themselves, said that we'd like to compile a document of all known actors and supporters. Please comment below with legal names of these individuals, area of residence, and/or school board rep known accounts on social media, and any other info that you feel is relevant. So we need to know their name, their address, what school their kids go to, who they're responsible for. We need to know everything about them. That way we can publicly express this information and dox them, because that's essentially the goal here. And I think one interaction on this group is really telling of how dangerous critical race theory actually is. So in this interaction, one name pops up on this blacklist, and someone says, why is she on the list? I haven't seen her support anything that's anti-critical race theory. And then the creator of the list said, I put a question mark next to her because I'm curious about some of her comments about the Dr. Seuss nonsense and race equality generally. She said, I'd be happy to remove her if I'm off the mark. And the response? No, I wouldn't go so far as to take her off. However, from what I've seen, she is very carefully neutral. And the reason this is so telling is because your name can be put on a list like this just for being neutral about critical race theory. Even if you're not opposed to it, they'll put your name on a list anyway just to be safe. And trust me, you shouldn't be neutral about something like this because it's complete nonsense. You should be actively against it. But even if you're not, well, you still might find yourself blacklisted and doxxed because. And that's pretty much the end goal here. If you don't agree with them, then you are against them. That's why they say it's not enough to just not be racist, you have to be anti-racist. And if you're not anti-racist, well then you're not really an ally. So you have to actively show not that you're just not racist, but that you're anti-racist, which means you must support all of these stupid things. And let me give you one last example from my own personal experiences here. About a year ago, I made a video talking about white fragility, which is Robin DiAngelo's horrible book that is a bestseller because we are idiots. And in that video, I obviously criticized her and pointed out where she was mistaken and that she made a lot of errors, and a lot of the things she said, they were in fact racist. She's trying to be anti-racist and show white fragility, but she was just showing that she is a little bit racist. Now, I got a lot of positive responses here, but one family member on my wife's side commented and said that I just kind of wasted my time because no one takes someone like Robin DiAngelo seriously. And she was a Democrat, this person who commented. She said that it just doesn't make any sense to make an entire video about this because it's pointless and it's not really important. And that was a year ago. And now we have all of this, and it's just getting even worse. This is why it's important to not try and pretend it doesn't exist or that it's not a big deal, because it really is. If you want your children to be taught that showing math or getting the right answer in math is racist, well then go ahead and keep pretending this doesn't exist. But if you want to point out how absurd all of this is, well, then you kind of need to. You need to be against it. Because if you're not, then critical race theory will just continually run rampant throughout all of society. We've already seen it in education, in corporations, in the federal government. It's pretty much going to be everywhere. And there are plenty of more examples of how ridiculous critical race theory is and how dangerous it is when it's brought into the classroom. I've made a number of videos about them. Go ahead and check them out. So anyway, to wrap everything up, Governor Ron DeSantis is doing a good thing. Stopping critical race theory from being taught in classrooms is perhaps only the first step, but it's a really good and important step because we don't want to indoctrinate our children and make them think that black students can't get the right answer, because that's essentially what Oregon was teaching their students. And the more I see of Ron DeSantis, to be honest, the more I'm tempted to, maybe look at Florida as a place to move. There's going to be a lot of old people there, but maybe he's doing okay. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.